Hey boys and ghouls, this is your old pal, the Crypt. I leave for 1 minute and he's already trying to take over my Halloween special. Anyways, if you're new here, I'm Dave, or Effie, and if you're wondering what's up with this whole look, I was gonna go for some sort of costume for a Halloween video, but I couldn't really decide on what, so I guess I'm going for Death Stranding this year? I guess we could call this the very first Strand-type Halloween video, but that's aside from the point. What I'm really here to do is give you a spooky first look into all the upcoming indie horror games that are redefining the genre as we know it. From grungy horror brawlers to stylish new takes on a classic concept and a few wild cards in between, here's every upcoming indie horror game I managed to play in the month of October. Some of these demos might still be available at the time this video goes up, while others have disappeared back into the black hole of development. Either way, I hope everyone will be able to find at least one game they like from the wide variety I scrounged up for this video, so let's just get down to spooky business. Butcher's Creek is basically a spiritual successor to Condemned. At least that's what everyone was saying before this demo came out. In it, you play as some sort of crazed film collector, searching for depraved videotapes in a compound filled with dangerous criminals. While it is true that Condemned is probably the main inspiration here, this isn't just a low-budget take on a grungy horror brawler from 20 years ago. If you weren't already aware, this is the next project of the infamous Dusk Dev, known for creating games like Dusk, Iron Lung, and Squirrel Stapler. But of all his prior games, this one feels closest to the Pony Factory. In fact, the majority of the levels feel like they'd fit right into that game. I wouldn't even be surprised if a lot of the grungy industrial assets from the Pony Factory made their way into this one. There even happens to be one special enemy that sports the pony skull from the cover art of that game. Now, it's no surprise that a dev's new game has elements of his older work, but beyond those grungy visuals, there's still a lot of interesting stuff here. The current demo consists of melee combat with various masked men, interspersed with a few gruesome scenes you can photograph to regain health. Now, if I were the protagonist of this game and I ran into a masked killer in an abandoned factory, I would simply turn around and leave, but I guess those videotapes are just too tempting to pass up. Speaking of which, the tapes serve a dual purpose of allowing you to save at TVs or increasing your max health if you choose to hold on to them. It's a very strange mechanic, and when you pair it with the concept of grimy photographs healing you, I can only assume the main character isn't any better than the people they're fighting. But hey, you can kick enemies with your bare foot, so that's something. I don't really know where this game's going in the future, but based on the dev's previous work, it's gonna get really weird, and I'm all for it. Heartworm is, you guessed it, another retro indie horror that puts its own spin on all the survival horror classics. You play as someone searching for a door to the other side that you heard about from some strangers on a message board. If some random people on Reddit told me about a door to the underworld, I would just ignore them, but I guess our protagonist is built different. Either way, it's enough narrative momentum to land us in some sort of nightmare suburbia filled with human-shaped static monsters. Gameplay-wise, you've got your tank controls, door loading screens, fixed camera angles, a PS1 inventory screen, and a camera instead of a gun? Yeah, I know Fatal Frame popularized the camera as a weapon, but I haven't really seen the concept used much outside of that series. In practice, it serves a similar purpose to the guns in, say, Resident Evil, but it also comes with the added effect of swapping the view to a third-person over-the-shoulder camera. This is both cool in that you can see the environment from a new perspective, and somewhat disorienting in that your view radically changes so often. First off, you're constantly swapping between camera angles by just moving around the world. This often leads to scenarios where you'll walk into a new part of the screen and instantly get turned in the wrong direction. But adding on the over-the-shoulder shooting mode means you also have to reorient yourself whenever you're trying to take a photo mid-combat. Although there is a bunch of good stuff here too, like the uniquely bizarre locations and the very cool way they made these fully 3D environments look like ancient pre-rendered backgrounds. But I never felt that great about the combination of controls and camera angles, regardless of what control scheme I chose. I actually would have loved to play this whole game in the third-person over-the-shoulder format, which seems completely possible given that aiming the camera already does that. Either way, I think there's some interesting ideas so far, and I'm curious to see how things play out in a longer format down the line. Juice is a dual narrative game about rampaging through a city as a carnivorous monster and watching the destruction unfold as a helpless human. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you might be familiar with the developer Color Fiction, who's been making surreal, chaotic games for a while now. His earlier work was more chill, ambient stuff, but he's been really amping up the tension with the horror lately. A while back I covered his game Resver in the DreadX Collection 5, which I said was easily the most memorable and best overall game in that anthology. So it's cool to see him pushing his unique art style further into horror work, and as always, it's a feast for the eyes. The chaotic, mesmerizing visuals on display here fit in perfectly with the gameplay of just devouring scores of people as you rush through this city. There isn't much of a challenge currently, as you basically just blast through a few set pieces in a matter of seconds and chomp down people along the way. In that regard, the extreme run speed feels borderline excessive, but there is some small satisfaction in just plowing through the levels like it's a speedrun. Once you're done with the quick monster segment, you get to play as a human, watching the city descend into chaos from your apartment windows. While the art and audio are on point, my only gripe with the demo so far is that there really isn't anything to overcome. There isn't a military trying to stop you, or other monsters to contend with, or some sort of time limit to worry about. You just kinda eat people at lightning speed, and then it's over. It's got some killer atmosphere to take in, but I don't know how this will work as a full game quite yet. However, I am open to being pleasantly surprised, so I'll definitely keep an eye on this one to see how it all pans out. Sorry We're Closed is a very vibrant, stylish game that turns the typical survival horror format on its head. It's sort of like Silent Hill meets Persona, but boiling it down just to comparisons is doing it a disservice. You play as a girl mysteriously transported to a nightmare dimension. For what purpose, I'm not entirely sure, but things are bad and you gotta figure it out. While there, you learn that you have the power to see both versions of the world at once, and you can use this anytime to create a sphere around yourself, revealing the regular world. This isn't only used for exploration and puzzle solving, but can also be used in combat to reveal enemies' weak points. It's a very neat mechanic, and also impressive that they effectively had to make every level in the game twice and layer them on top of each other, similar to the famous Dishonored 2 level, A Crack in the Slab. I just mentioned that the dimension shifting power works in combat, so I should probably mention that this game has a very unique combat system. While you're walking around, you're mostly watching yourself from overhead, semi-fixed camera angles, but when you go to attack, you switch to a first-person view. You can either melee with your funky axe or shoot enemies with one of the equally funky guns you find later on. If you're using your dimension powers, then any enemy inside your radius becomes invincible aside from one glowing weak point on their body. So you can use more ammo to take out enemies safely from afar, or risk them getting in close and taking them down quickly with a few precise shots. It's an interesting mechanic that I don't think I've ever seen before, but clearly there's a lot of room for some clever variation later down the line. Aside from that, you'll be scavenging for some supplies, solving light puzzles, and talking to a lot of NPCs scattered about. Speaking of NPCs in particular, I have to say this game is, well, very spicy is probably the YouTube-friendly way to put it. It's not an adult game, but the character designs and lots of themes throughout are unabashedly risque, which, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want a Dami Goth GF or a shirtless Goku BF or whatever the hell this thing is, more power to you. Regardless, I think this will make the game pretty polarizing, and we'll be seeing lots of die-hard fans and haters when it finally comes out. In short, I commend the devs on making the spicy, stylish survival horror of their dreams that no AAA company would have the guts to touch. I can already tell early on that this game's gonna have a cult following, so it'll be cool to see how the final product turns out. Funeralopolis is kind of like the experience of going to an independent film festival, in that you're watching a lot of strange, possibly thought-provoking things happen, but nothing is really explained, which is fine. I mean, I've played tons of avant-garde indie games that are jam-packed with cool concepts, even if the story feels intentionally obtuse. This time around, you play as an apartment owner in some decrepit, brutalist city plagued by mysterious disease and other unexplained phenomena. Early on, a hole opens up in your wall, seemingly leading to nowhere. In what is probably a nod to Silent Hill, you stick your hand in the obviously cursed hole and contract the disease yourself. That's just the basics of a very vague story, but what really sets Funeralopolis apart are the visuals and world building on display here. They're quite a step up from many of the countless weird, unexplainable indies I've played before. I dig the low poly models mixed with the crisp, crunchy textures that are hand-painted with a level of skill you don't often see from low-budget horror games. And the various characters, notes, radio broadcasts, and more you encounter through this short demo drop countless hints at a much bigger world than you ever see. It's very obvious that this is a passion project the dev has put a lot of thought into, so I'm very interested to see how things develop. Judging by the bits of lore scattered around so far, they've already got a ton of ideas about this world that they could expand into a much bigger story. Secret Agent Wizard Boy is not a horror game at all. You see, I was playing horror games all month when I stumbled across this on Twitter. A wacky co-op wizard game in the style of the Harry Potter PS1 titles created by the developers of Dusk and My Friendly Neighborhood, who just so happen to be real-life brothers. Hell yeah. So even though it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the video, I decided to include this as a little palate cleanser. In Secret Agent Wizard Boy, you and your friends are undercover at Wizard School, working for MI6 to uncover an international crime syndicate led by Professor Grumblemort. In practice, you don't really do any spy stuff, but you do cause widespread chaos with your frankly overpowered magical abilities. The only real objective is to get 4 symbols to open a door and complete the demo, but the rest of it is pretty much a sandbox for you to break the game in hilarious ways. You start off with a simple magic missile type spell which you can use to trigger switches and fight random people. But things really go off the rails when you pick up the other 2 spells. One lets you grab and manipulate objects, while the other lets you duplicate just about anything, from items to NPCs, props, and even other players. The game puts no restrictions on this, allowing you to create infinite currency and potions, tank the frame rate with clones, or destroy the physics with countless intersecting objects. You have 7 days to accomplish the main objective, and everyone dying causes 1 day to pass. However, when you die, your body turns into a crumpled pile of rolling limbs, which you can continue to control for some more mischief. Even though you can't interact with things while you're dead, you can still do other things like light yourself on fire and then spread that fire to other NPCs, causing mass chaos. Meanwhile, the small castle demo level is packed to the brim with secrets, shortcuts, hidden treasures, strange NPCs,
I am Frog, blop blop blop,
and a lot more to discover. It's all very silly and surprisingly fun in how much freedom it gives you to break the game in the best ways possible. So grab a couple of your friends and unleash havoc at Wizard School. Or just wait until the full release. This short demo already provided us a lot of funny moments with friends, so I can only assume the final version is going to be even more wacky. The fear business seems somewhat straightforward at first. A kind of lo-fi, puppet combo-esque survival horror about discovering a cult in a spooky mansion. But what originally drew me to this game was seeing that excellent cover art standing out from all the other demos in the Next Fest. Looking at this developer's other games, they all seem to feature this same art style that you might expect to see on the cover of some killer 80s slasher movie. Digging into this a bit more, the art seems to be made by Facundo Porciel. Sorry if I butchered that, but definitely go check out their stuff, it's pretty rad. Back on topic, the demo for the Fear business is just so oddly presented that it felt like more of a teaser trailer than a video game demo. You spend the first 15 minutes or so learning about the story, walking around a motel, and interviewing a few people about their own urban legends. It seemed like an overly long intro for a demo, but I figured it was just setting the stage for some more effective scares in the mansion itself. So you get to the mansion, walk around for a minute, witness the beginning of a cult ritual, and then decide it's time to leave. Now obviously after seeing multiple doors with different symbols and setups for various puzzles on your way in, you know there's no way you're leaving now. And of course, the door you came in is locked, so you turn around and your gamer monkey brain thinks, okay, now I can actually play the game. Except some guy in a robe pops out in one of those classic puppet combo jump scares and the demo abruptly ends. Thinking back, I can't really think of any other game demo that doesn't really include any gameplay and just has 20 minutes of expository setup instead. It's a really strange choice, but hey, I can't speak for everyone. Maybe some people want this sort of teaser trailer type demo to set them up for the real game. Regardless, it's kind of hard for me to say if this game is going to be fun to play or anything like that from what I've seen so far, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Silly Polly Beast is a slick third-person survival horror action RPG mashup. It immediately stood out for its unique, low poly but not quite retro art style. You play as a runaway girl trying to reconnect with her sister. Unfortunately, being a runaway seems to be a dire crime in this world because the police are relentlessly hunting you down the whole time. In your efforts to avoid them, you come across a creepy drunk guy who clearly wants to do bad things to you, so you run off and fall into some random sewer pit. Whether you died or got transported to some other dimension doesn't really matter, because either way you have to fight your way out. Visually, it sort of reminds me of Life is Strange, with some bolder design choices and killer 2D art to match. While the gameplay side is very similar to the stuff Supergiant Games puts out, like Hades and Transistor. Most of the game consists of 3D battle arenas with a couple sections that shift into a 2.5D side-scrolling perspective. And the end of demo trailer teases at even more varied gameplay styles, like this literal take on the Subway Surfers concept. Back to the game, after fighting your way through various sewers and subway tunnels, you run back into that same drunk from earlier and get into a full-on boss battle with some random dude. The demo ends somewhat abruptly with you literally turning him into pink mist, which was rather unexpected for a game that seemed somewhat lighthearted, aside from that character. Anyways, the gameplay on display here feels pretty good so far, obviously reminiscent of its predecessors, but not in a bad way. However, the art is the real star of the show here. From 3D characters and environments to 2D menus and portraits, all of it is very high quality for a small indie game. There were some small text and grammar issues throughout, but nothing that can't be fixed up in the final version. I'm pretty sure this one's gonna be a hit if they manage to stick the landing, but only time will tell. Now this video isn't sponsored, so I'm gonna go ahead and tell all the newcomers about a little horror game I made myself over the past couple years. Ad Infernum is a first-person survival horror immersive sim mashup set in an isolated gas station in the middle of the desert. Think Resident Evil meets Prey, or Alien Isolation, or Amnesia the Bunker, or countless other horror games I've enjoyed over the years and taken small bits of inspiration from. Although I guess Amnesia isn't too accurate, as Ad Infernum was mostly complete by the time that game came out. But they are kind of similar in playstyle. They've both got stalking monsters, open-ended exploration, non-linear gameplay, and countless solutions to every problem. I also spent a ton of time designing a very intricate nerve system that can cause countless hallucinations and other strange effects. Eternal Darkness fans have an idea of what I'm talking about, but I can't really think of any other games that have a similarly complex sanity type mechanic. Anyways, what I'm really saying here is, if you dig unique survival horror games and want to support me, picking up Ad Infernum is a great choice. Hey, it might even be on sale when you go to check it out. Or, you know, you could always subscribe to the channel or check out some of my past videos. That's always greatly appreciated as well. And as for all the games I talked about, I'm gonna leave links to them down below. But no matter what you do next, I appreciate you sticking around till the end with me. I hope everyone has a spooky good Halloween. I'll see you all in the next one.